Myself is Chythra R, lecturer in biology. Today I will be starting the chapter 8, which comes under the unit 3, and that is the cell, the unit of life. So by this time you all know that in first year PUC biology there are totally 5 units. Let us start unit 3, cell, the unit of life. From this chapter it is for 10 hours and you will be getting for 8 marks, and hence it is one of an important chapter. One major question will be asked from this chapter. So let us see what are the contents we will be studying in this chapter. That is, first let us know what is cell. Okay, so because we know that cell is a very important structure and functional unit of life. You all know that. So let us study that again in detail. So what is cell? And next comes the cell theory. What does the cell theory is going to postulate and who proposed that? Let us study that in detail in the cell theory. And next comes an overview of cell. So cell, it is a very small thing, but it cannot be observed by the naked eye. It has to be observed only under the compound microscope. Though it is very small, there are many organelles that are present inside the cell. That is, for example, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, Golgi operators, all that is present inside the cell. We will study all that in detail, each and every cell organelle. Let us study the structure and function of those cell organelles which are present inside the cell, and that we will be studying in the topic and overview of cell. And again, the major important types of cells that we know, that is prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cell as a very primitive nucleus and eukaryotic cell as a prominent nucleus. This is the major difference between the prokaryotic cell and the eukaryotic cell, and let us study that in detail. And again, what are the differences which are present? All that let us study in detail. That is the prokaryotic cell and the eukaryotic cell. Okay, so these are the contents we will be covering in the chapter cell, the unit of life. Okay students, first if you see around yourself, okay, you see in the surrounding you can find many things are present, that is both living and as well as non-living things are present. You find many things, and some we say that as living and some we say that as non-living. So what makes the things living and non-living? And I know you know the answer for this, but again let us refresh what are living things and non-living things. So the things which are going to, that is living things which are going to grow, breathe and reproduce are considered as an living things. And the non-living things are the things which do not grow, breathe and reproduce are called as an non-living things. Okay, what makes the things as living? Means why these things can grow, breathe and reproduce? That is major, that is because of the presence of the cell. So what makes the things living? That is because of the presence of the cell makes the things living, and because of the presence of the cell the things can grow, breathe and reproduce, and many other characteristic features are also present in the living things. Basically we can say that is because of the presence of the cell, that is the cell, things are going to grow, breathe and reproduce, whereas in the non-living things there are no presence of cell, and hence it is called as a non-living things. So if we take up what is cell, so again we can find the answer for that, that is cell. You know that it is defined as that is fundamental, structural and functional unit of cell. Functional unit of cell. unit of life. Sorry, unit of life. So we call the cell as fundamental, structural and functional unit of life. That means any life, it has formed from the cell and hence it is called structural. It gives one structure to the life and hence cell is called as a structural unit of life, and all the functions which takes place in the life, that is because of the cell, and hence it is called as a functional unit of life. Okay students, let me repeat. That is, the cell is the one which gives a structure to the life and also one helps in functioning all the functions in the life, and hence cell is defined as fundamental, structural and functional unit of life. So this is the definition of the cell, and hence all the life, it is made up of the cell. All the life is made up of the cell. And coming to the number of cells, and we know that life is made up of cells, whether it is one cell or many cells. So based on that number, we can classify the organisms into two, that is unicellular and multicellular. Unicellular organism, as the name itself suggests, uni means made up of only one cell, multi means made up of many cells. Okay, some of the lives are made up of only one cell called unicellular organism, and some of the lives are made up of many cells called multicellular organisms. And here the example for unicellular organisms, that is protozoa, yeast, bacteria. These are some of the organisms which are made up of only one cell. Coming to the multicellular organisms made up of many cells, that is example for multicellular organisms, that is plants, animals, insects and human beings are multicellular. So this is based on the number of cells, that is one cell unicellular and many cells multicellular. These are the based on the number of the cells, and in all this, cell is the fundamental, structural and functional unit of life. Means all the functions is being performed, that is because of the cell. Okay students, now let us study the discovery of the cell. Who discovered the cell? Cell is very small, it cannot be observed by the naked eye. So for that, the discovery of the microscope play a very important role in order to observe the cell. So it was in 1595, a person called Jansen, with his father Hans, he discovered the first compound microscope. It was in 1595. Later, that microscope was gradually improved, and in 1665, another person called Robert Hooke. In 1665, he rediscovered, means he improved the microscope which was discovered by the Jansen, and he improved the microscope and he discovered his own microscope. Robert Hooke, what did he do? He discovered his own microscope and he started to observe the things. So Robert Hooke, he observed the cork cells. He first observed the cork cells from the oak tree. So from the oak tree, the outer layer, the bark cells, that is the cork cells. He was observing the cork cell. When he was observing the cork cells by the microscope which was discovered by himself, he was able to observe some small, very small, tiny hollow structures, that is tiny hollow like structures, that is like compartments, room like compartments. He was able to observe the room-like structures were observed. Also you can call that is honeycomb-like structure. So in jane kood iruttala athara. So that is honeycomb-like structure or room-like structure was observed by the Robert Hooke. So he called these structures as the cells. So hence he was the first person to coin the term cell. And he called these structures as cells, a room-like structure, but unfortunately those cells were not living, and those cells were which was observed by the Robert Hooke, the called cells were dead. These are the dead cells, and hence he was only able to observe the wall of that is an outer wall of the cell, and those cells were dead. And next come in the year 1667, another person called Antony van Leeuwenhoek. Antony van Leeuwenhoek, even he was discovering his own microscope. As a result, he discovered his microscope and he was observing the things under the microscope. While observing the things, he was the first person to observe the living cells. He was the first person to observe the cell, that is the living cell. Though the Robert Hooke observed the cells, those cells were dead. Antony van Leeuwenhoek, while observing the many things under his microscope, he observed the living cell, and hence the credit goes to the Antony van Leeuwenhoek for observing the living cells. So this is the discovery of the cell. And again, another person that is called as an M.J. Sleeden and Theodore Schwann. Another two persons play a very important role in postulating the cell theory. That is M.J. Sleeden in 1838. So M.J. Sleeden, what he was doing is one of a German botanist. In 1838, he was studying all the plant cells. When studying all the plants, he came to the conclusion that all plants are made up of cells, which together forms, those cells together forms the tissues of the plant. So he was studying of the plants, and while studying that, he gave a conclusion that all plants are made up of cells, and this was told by M.J. Sleeden in 1838. Next comes another person called Theodore Schwann. In 1839, he was studying at the same time almost. He was studying of the animals because he is one of a British zoologist. He is botanist and he is zoologist. So he was studying about the animals, and again he gave a conclusion that all animals are made up of cells. Together forms the tissue. So Theodore Schwann, he told that all animals are made up of cells, whereas Sleeden told all plants are made up of cells. Together, they both together gave a theory, and that theory, which is now called as cell theory, also called as cell concept, one of a very, very important theory, that is a cell theory. It was given by M.J. Sleeden, a German botanist, Theodore Schwann, a British zoologist. They gave a theory, and that is called as a cell theory. According to this theory, they propose that all living organisms are made up of cells. And this is the theory which was proposed by Sleeden and Schwann. According to this theory, all living organisms cellular law, we know many cells are present. How the new cells is going to develop? And that was not answered by these two persons. Means how the new cells are arised, and this was not answered by Sweden and Sean, and that was answered by another person called Rudolf Virchow. He was the person who gave a final shape to the cell theory, and he described how the new cells are arised. How the new cells are arised, and that was this explained by Rudolf Virchow. Rudolf Virchow gave the answer to this, that is, new cells are arrived from the pre-existing cells. Pre-existing cells. Okay. Pre-existing cells, you know that mitosis cell division, you know children, that is one cell will be present, divides into two cells, new cells, and again those two cells is going to divide, again new cells will be formed. We know now that, okay, but in those times it was not known that how the new cells are going to develop, and that was told by Rudolf Virchow in 1855. He explained that new cells are being developed from the pre-existing cell. Means first the cell will be present, that from that cell new cells is going to develop, and hence by giving an answer to this, Rudolf Virchow gave a final shape to the cell theory, and according to that all living organisms are made up of cells, and the new cells are arise from pre-existing cells. From pre-existing cells. According to that, so he postulated, he gave a final touch to the cell theory and gave a final shape, and he gave two postulates, that is, all living organisms are made up of cells, and new cells are arise from the pre-existing cells, and this was proposed by Rudolf Virchow. Though the cell theory was proposed by Sweden and Sean, it was finally concluded by Rudolf Virchow. In this way, these persons gave the theory called cell theory. Okay, students, now let us study about the size and shapes of the cell, because in cell we can find there are different sizes and different shapes. Cells differ greatly in their size, and the smallest cell, that is the mycoplasma, it measures about 0.1 to 0.3 micrometer, and this is the smallest cell. So mycoplasma is one of the prokaryotic cell. And the largest cell, that is the ostrich egg, which measures about 10 to 15 centimeter, is considered as one of the largest cell. Bacteria, we think that bacteria is the small, but we can compare to the mycoplasma, it is slight bigger than the mycoplasma and measuring about 3 to 5 micrometer. And the blood cells, that it measures about 7 micrometer. Children, what is the micrometer means? It is the unit one which is used to measure the cells under the microscope. Along with the micrometer, that is another units like Armstrong unit, nanometer are also used to measure the cell under the microscope. And the nerve cell, which is measuring about 4 micrometer, it is one of the longest cell in our body. And the sperm is the smallest cell in human body. In this way, the cell will vary in its size and also it will vary in its shape also. If the cell, if it is not spherical or completely rectangular and with many angles, such type of cells are called as an polygonal cell. If the cells are cube-like, then that is called as an cuboidal cell. And if the cells are column-like, then we call those cells as columnar cell. And some of the cells, that is for example RBC, are plate-like or disc-like. And the cells also, in the case of nerve cell, it is branched and it is long. And a trachate xylem cell helps in conduction of water. It is one of an elongated cell. And next, the WBC, it is irregular in shape and hence it is called amoeboid in shape. And the mesophyll cells which are present in the leaves are spherical or oval in shape. In this way, cells differ greatly in its size, and hence these are the different shapes and sizes of the cells. Okay students, in today's class we discussed about the introductory part to the cell, that is introduction to the cell, and next the discovery of the cell and also the shapes and sizes of the cells. So in the next session we'll discuss about the prokaryotic cell. With this we'll come to the end of the session. Thank you.